Good evening. Welcome to Investigator News, and this is the World War III report. William, how you doing tonight? We bright-eyed
I'm
and
percolating.
bushy-tailed?
I'm percolating.
You're percolating.
Yeah, make you worried.
I don't know. I'm still kind of percolating from the caffeine funnies on the last show. Uh, those are some of them are pretty good. So you have to watch it, folks, if you didn't get to see the earlier show. We do a lot of funnies at the end. Uh,
Yeah, or they won't know how to percolate.
That's right. Now, the big story of the day was the crash of the V-22 Osprey aircraft. William tells me it's Air Force, right, William?
Right, it's in the V-22 Osprey, United States Air Force. I think it's
And
353rd or 533rd Air Force. Did they say it was Kadena or that they were out of? Or
well, no, it didn't say. It said with 8 people aboard, crashed off the coast of western Japan. This was confirmed. The Japanese Coast Guard said the crash site is off Yakushima Island, and patrol boats and aircraft have been deployed on the location to search for uh, rescue efforts and finding out exactly where the helicopter or the Osprey. I just want to keep calling it a helicopter. I don't even think it's a helicopter. Um, um, to and the aircraft have been deployed to the location to search for rescue efforts. At least one person was killed in the crash, Coast Guard officials said, according to the Associated Press. Air Force Special Operations Command aircraft, they said they are now very concerned and about over safety concern report they're going to be writing up. The other is that bodies of 3, um, there was one in Australia. I think that was the one before it. Um,
it
uh,
went down over water as well.
right. The United States Air Force CV-22B, that's what it says, Osprey, from Yokota Air Force Base, Japan, assigned to the 353rd Special Operations Wing, was involved in an aircraft mishap while performing a routine training mission off the shore of Yakushima Island, Japan. With 8 airmen on board, the crew's conditions are unknown at this time. Now, William, if I remember right, an airman, that's a lower ranking Air Force personnel. Airmen
So,
usually?
if you're in the Air Force, everyone's an airman.
Okay, never mind then.
General all the way to the bottom, just like
I just thought it
Navy,
had rank, like sergeant, and I thought an airman was lower class. Not that they're lower class, but
it's like if you're in the Army, you're a soldier from the top to the bottom, or in the Navy, you're a sailor from the top to the bottom.
I know all the Air Force guys are saying, doesn't that woman know? You know what that means, Karen? Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, throw the popcorn at Elly for not knowing that one. I should have known that. I was Air Force. I was an Air Force brat. Well, Army Air Corps brat. And most of my family was in the Air Force. So I should have known that. Okay, so the crew's conditions are unknown at this time. Emergency personnel are on the scene conducting search, rescue, and investigations. The cause of the mishap is currently unknown. Further information will be released. According to the Japanese local authorities, a witness saw the aircraft's left engine on fire as it descended at the time of the island's airport. It disappeared from radar shortly before the crash. Um, William, what all do you know? Well, I'm going to have to pull your picture down and put this other one up.
Well, the Air Force has special operations people, forward air controllers and stuff that embed with special, or like the SEALs, and they embed with the Army Rangers Rangers, with the Marine Raiders, and they guide in aircraft or guide in bombs or whatever's needed to the right place to protect, our special forces. Well, these guys, there are a bunch of them, I guess 8 of them on the aircraft. But these guys go through all the same training that a lot of the same training that SEALs do. So they're very good divers, swimmers. They're good at pretty much every kind of terrain, and so they have a really good chance of surviving. When a tilt rotor or a helicopter crash, they're top heavy, so they tend to roll over, and special ops are trained to be able to get out of the aircraft quickly in the case they go upside down in the water. So that's good. And they're specially trained to be able to create their own flotation devices, improvise all kinds of different things. That's good. And the pilot himself flew the aircraft right to the last moment, even as it was going upside down in the air. The pilot was still trying to fly in the direction of the airport. So anytime you end up in an aircraft going down, you increase the likelihood of survival tenfold if the pilot maintains control of the aircraft to the point that they can right up to the point of impact. So the pilot did his job very well, from what I understand.
I think these are awesome planes. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video, and it'll give you the history. It'll give you the crashes. This aircraft has had many crashes, folks. And William, you said they're working on a new one to replace it?
Right. They've got a new one in the works right now. They're in the process of manufacturing it. And, for the number of parts and the complexity of the aircraft, the Osprey, but if you take the number of moving parts in Osprey, they're almost, I think they're safer than a fixed wing aircraft. But when you add all the parts together, the Osprey has a higher accident record. But if you have to fly a long ways and have to land without an airport, the Osprey is the way to go. It's better than a Chinook or a Black Hawk because it can get there faster, go farther, carry more weight. And it's not a helicopter, it's not an airplane. They call it, a tilt rotor.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
The Bell Boeing V-22 Osprey is an American tilt rotor aircraft with vertical takeoff and landing as well as short takeoff and landing capabilities. The Osprey was designed to combine conventional helicopter capabilities with the long-range, high-speed cruise performance of a turboprop aircraft. After the failed Iran hostage rescue in 1980, the U.S. military realized it was in need of a new type of aircraft that could take off and land vertically, while also capable of carrying combat troops at speed. This led to the start of the JVX aircraft program in 1981. In 1983, the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps were given the lead in the JVX program. The program combined requirements from the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy. A request for proposal was issued in December 1982, and in February 1983 Bell and Boeing Vertol submitted a proposal for an enlarged version of the Bell XV-15 prototype. A design contract was awarded in April 1983. By March 1985, 6 prototypes of the V-22 Osprey were being produced by Bell and Boeing. Full-scale development began in 1986. By 1986, all 4 U.S. military services were planning to acquire the V-22. However, in 1988, the U.S. Army left the program. The reason given was the need to focus the budget on more immediate aviation programs. Attempts were made to defund the V-22 program, but these attempts were stopped by Congress. The first 6 prototypes flew in March 1989 in helicopter mode, and in September in fixed-wing mode. The first sea trials were completed in December 1990. 2 prototypes crashed in 1991 and 1992, and between October 1992 and April 1993, the V-22 was redesigned and redesignated the V-22B. The empty weight was reduced, the design was simplified, and build costs were reduced. Flights resumed in June 1993. Flight testing of 4 full-scale development V-22s began in 1997, but soon fell behind schedule. The first low-rate initial production aircraft were delivered in May 1999. In 2000, there were 2 fatal V-22 crashes, killing 23 Marines. The V-22 was grounded while parts were redesigned. In June 2005, the V-22 completed its final operational evaluation, and in September the Pentagon formally approved full-rate production. The Osprey typically operates as a helicopter during takeoff and landing, and when airborne, the engines rotate forward for horizontal flight. 43% of the airframe is made up by composites. The rotors can fold for storage, and the wings can rotate to align with the fuselage. The V-22 is powered by 2 Rolls-Royce A1107C engines. The V-22 can be armed with one .308 caliber M240 machine gun, or 150 caliber M2 machine gun on the rear loading ramp. Some V-22s also has a belly-mounted remotely operated gun turret system, known as the Interim Defense Weapon System. Trials have been made with other kinds of weapons as well. The Osprey has generated some controversy, since it has been involved in several crashes and minor incidents during its time in service. The V-22 Osprey has served in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as in a Marine Corps Crisis Response Task Force. It is used by the Marine Corps, as well as the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy. It is also used by Japan's self-defense forces, and is being considered by other countries.
So, yeah, if you enjoyed it, subscribe to us. So that is a short history, but it did crash quite a few times in 2000, I think 2009, and it's had issues all along. And so, and as William told us,
So when it takes off and goes from takeoff to forward flight, the rotors tilt forward. Okay, and so you've got to have all the power going through a transmission and also a clutch assembly. So you can disconnect motors at either end of the aircraft, but the propellers keep moving at the same speed. And if you have a failure there, it generates hideous amounts of heat. You also have to tilt a turbine spinning, at tens of thousands of RPMs, and it has centrifugal force. And if you rotate those blades too quickly, it creates a terrible amount of torque on that engine. And it really affects bearings and also can cause collision of the turbine blades. So it's an extremely complex aircraft, and all the flight and power requirements are held within the wings, and the fuselage basically hangs by a pivot, and there's wires that go up from the pivot in the cockpit to control everything. So yeah, it's complex bird.
Okay, now I got a list. The crashes: June of 1991, July of 1992, April 2000, December 2000, April of 2010, June of 2012, May 2015, December 2016, August 2017, September 2017, June of 2022, August 2023, and then this one. So that's what I was saying, folks. It's this V-22 has crashed many times, and I think that's why. Well, I know that's why they are now building a new one to replace this. just too many crashes. You know, I heard earlier on the news a lot of crashes, and so I went and I looked it up and through the Air Force and Japan too. But it said most of it was on the Air Force site. So I went to the military Air Force site and typed it in, and it gave me that list. And I no wonder, it definitely needs to be replaced. So
It's a loved aircraft. They use it for replenishment at sea. The Navy does between their replenishment ships and the aircraft carriers and to their support ships so that they can keep moving continually. So what they do is they have ships set up to intercept the ready battle groups and give them new stores of food, fuel, all kinds of stuff. And those Ospreys are just loved because they can hook, 2 pallets of food and mail and everything else and just ferry it back and forth between the carrier decks and the replenishment ships and, forklifts, and just keep running material right into the aircraft carrier as fast as they receive it.
mhm.
So they love it. It's so good for island hopping where you don't have good improved runways. The Marines love it because you can get a good load a long distance and put people down on the beach and behind enemy lines if they choose.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a special weapon, but it's dangerous.
Yeah. Okay, so this is something I found out from my Israeli source, and he told me a report had come out. And he's not sure if any of the news people have gotten this report yet, but between Hamas and Qatar, they're the ones negotiating the hostages. Well, this report came out, and according to Hamas, now we know they don't necessarily tell the truth, but before they gained their freedom after being held for more than 50 days by the Iranian-backed terror group, hostages were confronted by Palestinian civilians who were shouting Allahu Akbar and blocked. They were the ones that blocked the Red Cross vehicles from entering or exiting when they got into Gaza. According to the local reporting, even the Egyptians had a report saying that they were blocking the boundaries and wouldn't let the trucks in, and they wouldn't let the trucks back out. The other thing was when they first hit, now they had the concert. Well, Palestinians started attacking the people. And Hamas says we rescued them from the Palestinians from killing them and starting to beat them up and drag them through the streets. So I mean, you can't rescue and then kidnap babies and 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds and women and old people, and then say that, hey, they're worse than we are because they wanted to hurt them too and screaming Allah Akbar in the streets. So that was the reports that they had, and now when the hostages are being released. Palestinians are heckling them, and they're being harassed and threatened with death. So it's, see, this is why Netanyahu really wants to just go all the way, folks. So now the report I've got, there's a lot happening. The last few days, Israeli authorities said that they had taken control of huge swaths of northern Gaza, and at least the above ground areas, but there's still the tunnels underneath. But the tunnels that they have gotten hold of are shattered now. The tunnels left are still under Hamas control, and the Israel army descend to this underground tunnel network, ushering in a new chapter of a battle. They have been practicing in the tunnels for years. This is the beginning of the war that has lasted for decades, and Hamas fighters have spent years expanding the tunnels, creating a massive labyrinth. As a result, Israel has been preparing for a long time battle in the tunnels, forming special units and practicing in tunnels to fight them. They knew there would come a time of day when their military was ready with their special units to be able to confront Hamas in these tunnels, as well as Hezbollah. Um, the weapons, according to Israeli officials, they are stockpiled along the tunnels. They said some are in rooms. In the north, the Israeli army has deployed enhanced means for victory, such as robot carrying cameras that map the tunnels and container trucks laden with explosive materials, which spray into the tunnels via hoses every day. Israel new intelligence form the network discovered the new tunnels and interrogates the militants as they capture them. Understanding of the underground metropolis, Israel has a result of extensive study. After all the reconnaissance missions, Israel launched a successful incursion into the tunnels, they say, when they first started it just a few weeks ago. Israeli soldiers discovered tunnel entry in one of the mosques in northern Gaza, another outside a Ranti hospital in northern Gaza. Then the military employed a robot to locate an explosion-proof door at the bottom of a 20-meter deep well. The tunnel opening from the inside of Al Shifa hospital complex in Gaza International, the pressure mounted on the Israel army to justify the siege. And this is what the report that they put out. It was in the hospitals. And the compounds below these hospitals were amazing. And not only that, but they say that Afghanistan Taliban have long employed tunnel networks to also help them build these tunnels to combat and better equip opponents. However, they've researched the Hamas tunnel network regarding security officials. Hamas says Israel and the entire system could stretch hundreds of kilometers beneath Gaza. And inside the tunnels, Hamas utilized them to smuggle supplies from Egypt all the way almost to the northern Gaza border. And not only that, but they can launch across, they say, B strikes. Now, Israel's, the network compromises narrow tunnels broad enough for a single person to pass through, as well as larger sections with chambers and offices. They've got medical facilities designed to conceal during a siege, and also concrete walls and ventilation system that strengthen some of the tunnels which run on solar power and other fuels. They also have the basic telecommunications below. Israel has accused Hamas of utilizing underground ventilation systems and limiting fuel supply to its own people. This is the most intricate tunnel network that Israel has ever seen. They said many of their soldiers have done battles elsewhere. They've seen short tunnels. They've seen tunnels that stretched for miles. But to have a full medical facility underground in one of these tunnels, they said, is amazing. Hamas is believed to have used the tunnels for some of over 200 captives. Now, according to the Egyptian and Qatar, they have put them into small sections, separated them out because they don't want them in a large room in case one of the tunnels room collapses from the army above. So that way they are saying that's why they gave them to other terrorists. William, I don't believe a lot of this. They say they gave them to other terrorists to keep the hostages safe and smaller rooms and smaller places along the 300-mile tunnels. Hostages trapped many kilometers through the tunnels. They said it's about the width of a wheelbarrow before reaching large tile chambers. Underground Gaza, the militants transferred lift shifts and other hostages to smaller rooms, and that's when they were separated. They have rooms with bathtubs and showers and mattresses that are lined up against the wall. When being moved, they could hear explosions from the floor as they walk. This is according to one of the people that were rescued, or one of the hostages. And they said for quite some time before ascending, flights of stairs, and then ladders. Hamas also used tunnels to ambush Israeli soldiers in Gaza, shooting assault rifles, throwing grenades, and anti-tank missiles before retreating safely underground for the troops. And they're using manhole covers, gutter openings, and drainages, and weird openings in the sides of some houses, or even comes up in sheds and garages. Let's see, Israel have discovered hundreds more tunnels. And not only that, but when they have discovered more tunnels that feed off, that dead end, they were able to discover hundreds more soldiers that they didn't even know existed. So destroying the shafts can prevent ambushes such as I just told you about. A special army unit called Yalam, which means diamond in Hebrew, equipped with tunnel-specific weapons and explosives. It includes an infantry and armored soldiers. It has its own fighting unit trained underground. Warfare Avi went on to say that recent years, the Israeli army made a priority to train regular combat troops in underground warfare. And also simulated war simulators. They say when they enter the tunnels, they do a gel-like explosive material is one of the main methods employed. They attach hoses attached to container trucks, used tons of liquid, sometimes it's just water, to spray into the tunnels to flush them out. When asked about fire, they said no, because why would they do that when they're in search of the hostages? You know, I don't know. Does anybody have any questions on this? It just basically goes into that Hamas started on these tunnels, they say early 2006. And when Israel basically withdrew, when they started seeing they've got these massive tunnels and they did not know how to navigate through them. So they went ahead and backed out of the tunnels, and then worked out with a ceasefire, and agreeing that they would be peaceful. They would give them land. They did an exchange, and the Palestinians got over 1,000, and Arab.
Prisoners?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It just says inmates, Arab inmates. So, and as far as what they've released, they've only released one of our Americans, and I think they still have 8. William, I didn't write it down on this, so I'm guessing. Now, some of the hostages that came out said they could hear explosions above them in some of the rooms they were in, and they would quickly be moved, and they would go further. They said it seemed like further, and they would go down more stairs. And asked how deep, one of the hostages said it seemed like at least a mile, but he said he could be wrong. But it just seemed like they went in, they went down, 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 flattened out, but then it like was to a slant, and it went down further, and then it would level out for a very, very long time, and then they were in rooms. Sometimes they would climb up um, to certain rooms, and other times it would just be on one level. And they said they didn't see any of the big luxury rooms, or they didn't see nothing like that. It was all small rooms with, almost, they described it like a jail cell. It was a room that had a small bathroom, a sink, a toilet, and a bunch of mattresses. And it was always tile flooring. So they knew enough to put tile flooring in. So, but yeah, they're sending in dogs. The only thing with the dogs is they're afraid that um, they'll get shot. Is one in this report that I was reading. It's it's like a 10-page report. So I went through and grabbed little snippets out of it because just to give you guys, what's going on. They're not going to stop. They're going to keep going. They said they have to because of the hostility of the Palestinians above ground are getting very hostile. And they say because America and the rest of the world is behind them, so I guess that means they're going to act out. Um, so that is pretty much. Let me. I know I had. Um, they do have the new list for the next ones to be released, but they said if another bombing attack or any strikes towards Israel, that they'll stop all this agreement. And that's according to Netanyahu. He's ready to go back to get this done, and so they can create a new life for some people. So Qatar says dozens of Israel hostages have gone missing in Gaza. Remember, I mentioned that the last couple days. And now Qatar, in this report they had, they said they don't know what happened to them. There was so many, but at least 50. It could be 60, maybe 70, they said, are gone. They don't know what happened to them. If the other terrorist groups have murdered them, um, or if they are just they escaped. So, William, I don't know if I would believe that. I think they know what happened to them.
So, if you receive back prisoners, one of the things you do is debrief them, and you learn about the system in which they've been held and the proclivities of the system, how the guards behave, timings, movements, all this sort of stuff. Well, it's not just Hamas that wants to know. There's 17 other Arab countries in the region that wants to know. These people may be going from intelligence group to intelligence group so that they can be questioned by the different intelligence services, so that these other groups that are hostile towards Israel will understand their prison system. Because once you understand a prison system, you can also break into a prison system. You can rescue people from a prison system, and you can prepare your fighters to be most resistive to that prison system.
Yeah.
So all that's very important to them. It's very good information, and not any one intelligence agency is going to know all the questions to ask because they haven't had to deal with the Israeli prison system and how the justice system works in Israel. Because once you understand it, you can exploit it. Everything in war and aircraft design is a double-edged sword. You make trade-offs for what you want, and you hope to come out ahead of the other competitive warfighting group by making fewer mistakes.
Now, Karen asked about the Hamas broke the ceasefire. Now, I did this yesterday. Yes, they did. They planted explosives in quite a few buildings and they went off. And you could see it in the skyline yesterday morning. Now, what they did was then ground troops of Hamas um, basically started firing upon Israeli soldiers, the IDF. And so, yes, they did break it. But Netanyahu, I mean, he's a very patient man for this. I would have just said, nope, that's it. That's all she wrote, folks, and been going back on with the war. Because, you know, we're finding out people are missing. Well, there was over 200. So how many of the 200 are missing? I think they've released 60, William. So if all they have is right about 150, they don't have many left. So I think this is why there's a pause. Maybe they're going to start handing over the men. I don't know. But yes.
Well, there's also been, since the war started, intelligence agencies and the police have picked up and arrested a bunch of more Palestinians that were caught working, you know, and spying as well within the country of Israel, because Palestinians are hired by Israeli businesses, right? And they come in and work during the day, and then they go back across the checkpoint and back into Gaza. Well, and that's been a good thing for Gaza, because they've been able to make some money, right? For their own household and whatnot. They don't have to depend on foreign governments. But Israel has, since they clamped down on October 7th, they've taken a lot more prisoners, if for no other reason that they want to interrogate them, to find out what they know about what's going on in Gaza, number one, and find out if they've been sending information back to Gaza and acting as spies.
Mm-hmm. So, and then we're going to move on to Kyiv, Ukraine. The wife of Ukraine's intelligence chief has been diagnosed with heavy metal poisoning and is undergoing treatment in a hospital. They say this is part of the war when you get too much exposure. They don't understand how she got the exposure, except for she does travel into these heavily shelled areas and war areas with her husband, Krylo Budanov. He's the head of the military intelligence agencies, known in Ukraine as GUR for short. Her condition was confirmed by the Associated Press and out of Ukraine agency spokespeople. So, the reason
so
go ahead.
Russia has a habit of poisoning their opponents. It's just one of the things they do. They use toxic metals. They've used radioactive materials. They're very good at poisoning, and the way they like to poison the most is either by contact poisoning. So you can put some on an object. As you retreat, if somebody touches that object, it's absorbed through the skin. Bang, you're off to the races.
Well, this was pretty much an intelligence guy with his wife, and to me, it sounded like a smoke. How she got contact from it, because they're moving into areas that are still smoking, and from war, and they've been wearing masks, and so somehow she has got this heavy metal poisoning. But William, I bet we're going to see a lot of that after this war is over in Ukraine, on both sides, Ukraine and Russians.
During the Cold War, we saw so much of this, not just against NATO allies, but also against dissidents within the Soviet Union. This is a common way that the Russians used to cull a group of people out from within another group and have them die without having it look like the Russians had come in and did kinetic warfare. So this is a popular interim type of warfare before they go to, guns and bombs. Yeah. And yeah, if they have somebody that defects and is spilling their guts to another intelligence agency outside the realm of where they're supposed to be, mm-hmm. you can end up dead quick.
Didn't a lot of them come back from Nam like that? If I remember right, something was, I don't know. I was so young, and I didn't really watch the whole Vietnam. Napalm, that's what I'm thinking. Napalm, the smell of napalm in the morning. That's what I guess it was napalm poisoning, maybe back then.
So they used a lot of Agent Orange in
that
Vietnam.
Too. That was the other one I couldn't think of.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail was shrouded by vegetation. Aircraft couldn't target the weapons coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail from the north. So they just defoliated the Ho Chi Minh Trail so that they could see everything coming down the trail, and they could find the fuel pipeline. They could target the trucks when they moved. And so the people that were using defoliant would sometimes breathe it in or come in contact with it and later end up with cancer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But poison has been a part of war forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, we even thought Saddam Hussein, remember they said he gassed his own people. Well, when I looked into that, William, I did find out his sons did. It was, I believe, the Kurds. But I could be wrong. It's been so long since I read up on that. But, Saddam Hussein, Iran, all of them do it. We did it, with like you said, Agent Orange over there. And I think the UN, well, I know the UN has put laws saying that it's not to be used anymore. But
so you can't use a choking agent anymore. You're not supposed to be using nerve agents, and you're not supposed to be using burning agents like during the First World War there was mustard gas in it. It burned out people's lungs, and people would slowly die of suffocation over sometimes 20 and 30 years. So after the war, people were still dying from Agent Orange, from the mustard gas, as World War II was kicking off.
Yeah, I want everyone to realize Gaza isn't a country, so these are terrorists. So they're not going to stick to Geneva Conventions. They're not going to stick to UN laws. They're terrorists. They don't have to listen.
Geneva Conventions only apply to NATO countries in the West, really. There's been no signatories from the East. And so all the countries...
I believe well, yeah, but I think at the same time, it's thrown out there just to show the morality of a war that's happening. And I think all the countries really have yelled at one point, or one point at a time. But it's only because when wars turn immoral, they have to reach out to the UN and say, hey, you need to stop this. Well, we're not part of NATO, but we want to keep them from torturing our civilians. So,
we get to publish this stuff to the United Nations so that countries have near real-time information coming out of war zones about civilians, about atrocities and whatnot. And by publishing it, so the whole world will see, okay, the entire world's paying attention at the UN, well then, hostages and prisoners tend to be treated better because, and people are taken prisoner rather than executed on the battlefield because it looks so bad.
Now Impaler, one of our chat people, Impaler, has a really interesting statement. Brittany Murphy had heavy metal poisoning after she was yachting with Dodi Fiad. Fiad, I think that I pronounced that right. His son was with Princess Diana. Her fiance had heavy metal poisoning, and when he died, too, her agent was Ari Emanuel. So, folks realize that some of these spy things that are coming out, that all you have to do is be pricked to be poisoned by anything. Now, I mean, they carry. It sounds like James Bond, but they got these canes. They can walk by and just poke you, and you're poisoned, and you'll drop dead within minutes, seconds sometimes. That's one of the big things. And do you think that's maybe what happened to Brittany Murphy? Or
yeah. Well, listen. Every time you have to fall back in a war, okay? Anytime you leave an area, you set booby traps. So you've got claymores with wires, and these are like spray pellets everywhere. It's like a landmine that shoots sideways. Everything gets set up so that when the enemy comes in, they're killed by these booby traps in buildings and around farms and whatnot. Well, they can use poison as well, not just explosives. And so if you're going into places that have just been liberated, meaning that they've just been booby trapped, and you're with your husband, there's a good chance you can get a skin uptake type nerve agent or heavy metal. Human beings are like sponges. People don't think of themselves like that, but when it comes to chemicals and that can do all kinds of things to the human body, we're like sponges. Yeah. And water's the greatest solvent, and all of these things they use for poison get dispersed by water. They're waterborne agents, and so being mostly water, we're just like a sponge to these chemicals. Yeah.
So now me and you talked about South Korea and North Korea. Folks, to me, this is tit for tat because we got China and Taiwan, and they're having issues back and forth. But all along, even the Philippines are having quite a few issues with China also. But South Korea is now having to put up with I call it tit for tat. War with North Korea, and they delayed their own spy satellite liftoff days after North Korea decided to do a satellite launch of their own. And not only that, the military preps for countermeasures with South Korea military preps for countermeasures due to the fact that North Korea is going to restore the DMZ guard post. Now, I know some of you have seen some of the movies where there's that guard post in between. Well, some of it had just been gated, and they just maybe have someone. I don't even think they were watching them, William. I think they were just observing them.
Yeah, they've got direct guard posts, and then they have guard posts that are farther back. Because remember, if you have somebody invading you, you want to have depth so that you have time to react. Distance equals time in warfare. And if you can just look at it visually and see what's going on at the DMZ Conference Center, it costs less money. You get a greater field of view. There's a whole bunch of benefits to it. And so both sides have kind of agreed to this. Now, during the 70s, there was a tree that was in the way of the South Koreans observing that thing, and they almost went to war over whether this tree could be removed or not, because it was in the demilitarized zone, and the other side hadn't agreed to it. Now, the other thing is as militaries arm up and get more armed, they take up a space of military value. Okay, it's like a checkerboard. The center few squares are the most valuable in on a chessboard. Well, that's kind of the same stuff that goes on between these two countries in the DMZ.
Mm-hmm.
So if one grows another capability, then the other one has to grow a capability. Otherwise, the power will be lopsided, and the DMZ will be crossed, and peace will be lost.
Okay.
So that's the problem with having a permanent truce. It's very, very expensive.
Yeah. And then North Korea claimed Tuesday of an alleged surveillance satellite that launched November 21st. Had already taken photos of several sensitive American military sites and even the White House. He basically said he spent much of his time Tuesday pursuing a report on the Malayong-1 surveillance satellite, whose launch prompted stern condemnations from South Korea and the United States and the United Nations, with what he said he was gloating over. The respected comrade, and I don't think he's respected, Kim Jong-un, saw satellite photos of Rome, of Italy taken, and on November 25th, pictures of Anderson Air Force Base was taken above Guam. Then November 27th, the pilot satellite images others regions. In the U.S. mainland, Kim reported he saw photos in detail of Norfolk Naval Station, the Newport dockyards, and airfield of Virginia. Pictures of up close pictures of the White House, the Pentagon, and other parts of Washington and other objects. An apparent attempt to verify the photos exist. They said not only would not disclose anything he had, disclosed where his satellite was at, but he said, I will claim that he's seen 4 U.S. Navy nuclear carriers and 1 British aircraft carrier. He says he's with great satisfaction of the pictures he got. So anyway, me and William kind of talked about it, and my question was William was, don't we know where his satellites are? Don't we know his satellites are doing this, William?
So NORAD tracks all the satellites with radar. We have to know where all the satellites are parked in orbit so that we don't move our space station into them or have a satellite crash, because as soon as there's a crash, you have little pieces of satellites go everywhere like a shotgun blast of birdshot, right? And they're moving at 17,000 miles an hour, and they start chewing up all the other satellites in low orbit if that's what they're parked in. So we have to track all the debris and all the satellites so we know who's. Now, having said that, we have weapons that can go and, neutralize satellites on our aircraft that can reach up into space with special missiles and, take out a satellite. So once a country gets into having satellites, they don't realize how completely expensive it's going to be, because now you have to have an entire staff now looking at all parts of those satellite images to see what intelligence they glean from them. So Kim Jong-un has just put a satellite in space, and he's right now having to build an entire industry of understanding the pictures from the satellite. So it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. There's always a double-edged sword, and it creates more tension in the area. Now, South Korea was going to put up a satellite just days after the North Korean launch, but now they've had to wait so they can get all the telemetry information on the North Korean satellite, because when you launch in close proximity, you have a chance of creating a collision in the orbit by how far out in orbit you are. So you're parked in different, like, onion layers of orbiting satellites. So if they both end up in the same place, they could actually run into each other. And so South Korea now has had to delay so they can make sure exactly what the telemetry of that satellite is going to be, and not just where it is now, right? But as it decays, as it falls out of orbit, because to be able to look all around the Earth, you have to have a low Earth orbit, and low Earth orbit satellites eventually fall out of space and burn up in the atmosphere. Well, you need to know not only where it is, but where it's going to be into the future. And that takes time to make all those calculations and be absolutely sure, because there's nothing more expensive than a piece of space hardware for a country.
Yeah.
Pound for pound, it's more expensive than stealth aircraft, bombers, special munitions. It is just absolutely expensive. And in a way, it might be good, because it might make North Korea even weaker, because they've had to put more resources into this new project.
And then we got China is cracking down on the Muslim minority outside Xinjiang region, making its first effort following an international attention on country's Uyghur population. So while the world is fixated on the Muslims of Gaza, we have turned our backs on, or the world turned their backs on, the Uyghurs that are Muslims that are being re-educated, tortured, and killed by China. But it's okay. And now they're creating harsher laws on the Uyghurs to be able to finish getting most of the men. They said they're okay with the women and the children and these areas in these cities, but not the men. And there's sometimes when an outspoken woman or a child or a teenager, or what we call our generations of Z's, when they act up, yeah, they will send them over there. But for the most part, they want the men. And so now they've expanded the crackdown on its Muslim minority even worse than it was before. And before, they put they had laws put in, and they went in and they started gathering them up. Now, William, you had something on lithium?
Right. So we have about a third amount of lithium we need to make our batteries, but there's some heavy metals we don't even produce right now that are 5 times more part of these energy storage batteries. So we're having to scramble and look for these minerals all over the country. And anytime they're opening up mines and whatnot, at the very beginning, they're doing their exploratory work. It's a good place to invest your money if you know a little bit about science and geology. You can make a lot of money at the startup of one of these major mines.
Yeah. The other thing, we're talking these batteries. I might do it on my show for tomorrow. Is the amount of fires that these EV cars. I think I found
I
a
think
video.
Ellie, I think it's nickel. I think nickel is the thing that they need the most of for making these batteries.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add before we close for the night? But I want to do a thing on these EV things because there was, I think, 60,000 cars that have been recalled now. And they're not listing them. I looked through the recall stuff, and it's like, where are the recalls on these EV cars that are catching fire? And people are driving down the road, and people are honking and telling them their car's on fire. And it's all underneath. But what I found out is they put all the batteries down on the bottom of the car, and then they put your seats and everything on top of it. So that's what's catching fire, they say. So do you have anything else, William, before we go?
Yeah, they put the batteries, they try to put it on the other side of a firewall, meaning a sheet of aluminum or steel, so it gives the people in the occupants in the car just enough time to escape before the cabin catches fire.
Yeah.
That's one of the engineering things that they do. Yeah, we've got a new problem here in, people say that we're racist here in America, but the truth is we're the most multicultural nation in the world. We allow everybody to assimilate. So we now have some Indian people. Now in India, there's a big fight against Islamics and Hindus. Just like, Islamics and Christians or Islamic and Jews, there's always a battle. And there's more people that are Muslim in India than there are people that are part of the Hindu religion. So
no, they don't. Hindus are. Oh boy, I'm at a loss. They're not Muslims. They're
Indians.
No, is it Indian religion? No, they. What's their god? Why can't I?
Well, they actually have a pantheon of gods.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, India does, and then there is. Maybe I'm thinking over there in Asia and stuff.
Now in Indonesia, they do what's called elder worship. So they worship the people that came before them. They bring presents to the graves. They have their Day of the Dead, and they have a time where they drive out evil spirits as well, because there's bad people that have died as well as good people, and so they try to bring them the good spirits and to drive away the bad spirits. And
Buddha. I'm thinking Buddha. That was the one I was thinking of. They have Buddha over. That's China, I believe. So
yeah,
they have the Buddha. We have our God, and the Muslims have Muhammad and their God. Because they used to chant during right around Arab Spring and before, when they were chanting, it would be something Allah Akbar. But what they were saying before was, our God is not your God. And they had it all over their signs. They were chanting it. And they don't do that no more. That was something they dropped right about the time of Arab Spring. So.
But we have Sikhs and Indians that have immigrated to the United States, right? And now we've just had our first incident where we've had an Indian man in the United States seeking out, it's not a pun, but seeking out these Sikhs that have immigrated to the United States to kill them. Mm-hmm. So the tension in India, in the subcontinent proper, has now made its way to the United States. And as tensions between the Jewish and the Palestinians go, we're going to see that come to other countries as well.
Yeah.
Those tensions migrate with the people, and if you have people on both sides, they'll clash no matter where they are. So, yeah, that's new. That's some new news that we have Sikhs haven't had a lot of bigotry aimed at them yet here in the United States, and naturalized Indians and Indians students that are here, expired visas and travel visas and whatnot. They're trying to take out these people that are unwitting that they're being targeted. I knew a number of Sikhs when I was in Bellevue. It's right next to Redmond, and the Sikhs ran the 7-Elevens, right? So they're easy to see. They wear their headdress. A lot of them keep the scroll of the Word of God right by their forehead so that they never forget about it, right? And so they're easy to identify and easy to target.
Yeah.
And so now we're going to have to start trying to suppress and stop that kind of tension in the United States and let immigrants know that they can't bring their hostilities and wars from other countries to our shores. And, you have to make examples out of it. It's a pain. But that's starting to happen. So if you're Sikhs and you're out there in the United States, you need to kind of watch your back for now until the government gets control of the situation. They will get control of the situation, but like all governments do, the United States is very slow to act. But when it does act, it overreacts, and it can even cause problems.
It could even start little small I'm not going to say wars, disagreements from country to country, especially in Africa. Africa, if you give them a little bit, they're going to take a lot. And like Somalia and Libya and even going down to Yemen and Oman, you just give them a piece of skirmish and it ends up being a battle. But like we said earlier, when you're a terrorist, you're not a country. So you treat terrorists a lot different in a war than you would. You're not as fair. And sometimes you got to use dirty tactics.
If you're the revolutionary, the terrorist, is a freedom fighter. If you're on the other side and trying to stop the terrorism, they're terrorists, right?
Yeah.
They might be military, but they're military terrorists.
Yeah.
And
Boko Haram approved that one because Boko Haram, they were big on wearing all fatigues all the time. And then when we started the migration hit really hard after, I'm going to say 2018, then we started seeing all nationalities coming over, men 15 to 25, 30, wearing fatigues. And to me, those are terrorists. So.
Well, at least the good thing about wearing fatigue and having identification is if you're detained by a hostile power during a war, you can't be considered a spy. You're just a combatant. And so if you're smart and you're in a war, it's better for you if you get captured to be wearing military fatigues, so you can be identified as a combatant and not a spy, because spies can be put to death.
Yeah. So, okay.
So I just want to say thanks, Elly, for letting me,
we thank our viewers big time
on your program and being able to share some of the information I have. Once you're in the military, you're always in the military. They say once a Marine, always a Marine. Well, that has to do with all the other services as well. And I find a way to contribute, even though I'm in a terrible physical situation.
Yeah, well, both of us, I think
still
we
have
got
information I can help.
You're full of information. And, we, me and William, we spend hours looking and watching and for our viewers. And, we totally appreciate you watching. Love you to share and, get others to subscribe and start watching us. We're only going to be better. So And William's great. He sometimes, you know, he has to beat me over the head with a stick and say, "No, I think you're wrong." And or sometimes he tells me things, and what I knew, I was wrong. And you know, when I look it up, and yeah, William was right. I was wrong on that one. Um, but we appreciate everyone watching, and you know, put the comments in there. And what makes us happy is subscribe and share us. So, and be sure to ring that bell. Thumbs up. Karen likes the thumbs up, I think. So we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's investigator news and weather and lifestyle news, and then Friday we'll throw William down the chat to battle it out for a trivia. So come on back and tell your friends about us. Thank you, William. We had a good time tonight. So, all right. We'll see everyone soon, and God bless.